They thought they could throw you away like yesterday's trash, but heaven saw you as a priceless jewel. They traded a diamond for dirt, a gem for gravel, and now they sit in the ashes of their own making, crying out in despair. This is not just heartbreak, this is judgment. This is not just regret, this is divine justice. When Scripture speaks of God's chosen ones, it often uses the imagery of treasure, pearls, and jewels. Jesus himself said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it." You were that pearl. You were that gem, not because you are perfect, but because God placed His light inside you. Your presence carried peace. Your words carried wisdom. Your prayers carried power. You were not ordinary, and they knew it. Deep in their heart, they saw your value, but arrogance blinded them. The narcissist looked at you and thought, "I can do better. I can find more. I can replace them any time." They confused temporary glitter with eternal worth. They confused noise with music, shadows with substance, pebbles with jewels. So they reached for what sparkled on the surface, but had no weight in the spirit. They grabbed hold of worthless stones, cheap connections, shallow pleasures, empty relationships, fleeting status. And while they were running after these pebbles, they dropped the very gift God had given them. Now the law of heaven has caught up with them, and what do they have left? Nothing but broken promises, backstabbing companions, and an empty soul. This is the great reversal. The one who mocked you is now mocked by their own choices. The one who belittled you now feels small in their own skin. The one who thought they could discard you now feels discarded by everyone around them. The foolish trade of pebbles over a gem. There is a kind of blindness that is not physical, but spiritual. It is the blindness of arrogance, the blindness of pride, the blindness of a heart that refuses to see value where God has placed value. That is the blindness of the narcissist. They stood before something rare, something radiant, something heaven sent you, the gem, and in their delusion they traded it all for pebbles scattered on the ground. Think about this. A gem is not found on the surface of the earth. Gems are dug out of the deep, refined in fire, cut and polished with care. A gem is costly because it carries history, it carries endurance, it carries the evidence of pressure and time, and that is you. Your prayers, your tears, your faith, your battles, your scars, they all formed you into a precious jewel in the sight of God. You were not cheap, you were not ordinary, you were not replaceable. But the narcissist, in their shallowness, could not discern the weight of your worth. To them, glittering noise was more attractive than silent depth. They confused the counterfeit for the real. They saw the pebbles of shallow companionship, people who told them what they wanted to hear, who entertained their vanity, who stroked their ego, and they said, "This is better." They saw the pebbles of fleeting pleasures, the passing thrills of sin, the applause of the crowd, and thought, "This will satisfy me." But Scripture warns us of this very folly. Esau sold his birthright for a single meal, despising what was eternal to grasp what was temporary. The prodigal son left his father's house to squander his inheritance on reckless living. Judas sold the Son of God for 30 pieces of silver, a bag of coins that clinked for a moment, but bought eternal regret. And in the same spirit, the narcissist threw away a pearl of great price for a handful of stones that hold no value. Do you see the pattern? The enemy always tempts with pebbles. Pebbles are easy to reach, easy to grab, and they seem abundant, but their very abundance reveals their worthlessness. Anyone can bend down and pick up a pebble, but not everyone can hold a gem. Gems require honor. Gems require care. Gems require recognition. And what happens when someone trades a gem for pebbles? At first their hands feel full. They tell themselves they are rich, they are admired, they are surrounded. But soon the truth emerges. The pebbles cannot shine. The pebbles cannot reflect light. The pebbles weigh down the hands, but do not enrich the heart. And while their hands are heavy, their soul remains empty. That is the reality of the narcissist's trade. They took the loyalty, the love, the prayers, the godly influence you carried, and discarded it for shallow relationships that turned on them, pleasures that faded, status that crumbled, illusions that vanished in the light of truth. The very people they preferred over you have now revealed themselves as hollow, faithless, cruel. And the narcissist is left staring at a pile of pebbles that cut into their hands, while the gem they once held is gone. This is the divine irony. They thought they had won. They thought they were clever. They thought, I can always find another gem. But heaven had entrusted them with something unique, something rare, something irreplaceable. And now the loss is undeniable. Beloved, let this sink in. Pebbles can never replace a gem. No matter how many, no matter how shiny, no matter how loud the crowd applauds, pebbles remain pebbles. They may fill a jar, but they will never carry the brilliance of a single jewel. The narcissist's tears are the proof of this. Their regret, their loneliness, their cries in the night, these are the sounds of someone who realizes too late that they gave away heaven's gift for hell's deception. And why did God allow it? To expose the foolishness of pride, to strip away their illusions, to show them that when you despise the sacred, you will be left with nothing but the profane. They chose the common over the holy, the worthless over the precious, the temporary over the eternal. And now their soul sits in famine, because the bread of life they once tasted, they rejected. So, remember this truth. You were never the problem. You were the gem. You were the gift. You were the light in their darkness. It was their blindness, their arrogance, their greed that caused the loss. They are crying now, not because pebbles betrayed them, but because deep down they know they threw away the one thing of true value, and they can never get it back. The consequences of their trade. There comes a moment when every choice bears fruit, when every seed planted reveals its harvest. The narcissists thought they were clever, thought they could gamble with heaven's order and somehow escape the bill when it came due. They stood before a gem of inestimable worth, a treasure that bore the fingerprints of God himself. And in their pride they tossed it aside for a handful of stones that any fool could scoop up from the street. At first, they congratulated themselves. They felt powerful. Their hands seemed full. Their life seemed loud. Their pride was swollen. They mistook weight for worth, abundance for blessing, noise for substance. But now the facade has collapsed, and the consequences of their trade rise before them like a storm on the horizon. Every decision they made in arrogance has turned against them. The very companions they exalted over you have now shown their true colors. Those who cheered their arrogance have vanished at the first sign of trouble. The shallow flatterers who once filled their ears with lies now use those same lips to mock them. The ones they thought would be allies have proven to be enemies, for pebbles can never be loyal. Pebbles scatter when the waves crash. Pebbles cut the hand that clings to them too tightly. And as they sit in silence, they realize that the so-called treasures they chose over you have left them emptier than they were before. What they thought would elevate them has dragged them down. What they thought would fulfill them has betrayed them. And then there is the inner torment, the gnawing voice that does not quiet at night. Scripture says in Proverbs 20:17, "Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but but afterward his mouth will be full of gravel. The narcissist is living this truth in real time. For a season, their stolen pleasures tasted sweet, their false victories looked impressive, their shallow triumphs made them laugh. But now their soul is choking on gravel. They cannot swallow, they cannot rest, they cannot escape the bitter aftertaste of sin. The bed they made for themselves is lined with thorns, and every night they toss in regret. Yet of all the consequences, the greatest is this: they lost you, and they cannot get you back. Gems are not found on every corner. Gems are rare, irreplaceable, and heaven-crafted. You are not a duplicate, not a cheap imitation, not one of many. You were chosen, refined, and given as a gift. And once a gem is thrown away, it does not return to the same hand that despised it. This truth now pierces them more deeply than any betrayal or financial loss. The realization that the treasure they once held will never be theirs again. Their tears are not only for the pain they feel today, but for the permanence of what they forfeited yesterday. And heaven has orchestrated this lesson. Make no mistake, this is not random misfortune. This is divine justice. God is not mocked. For every cruel word, there is an echo. For every act of betrayal, there is a harvest. For every time they made you feel small, God has arranged for them to be brought low. They exalted pebbles, and now those pebbles have turned to dust in their hands. They mocked a gem, and now the absence of that gem has become their prison. They laughed at your prayers, but now they are left begging for mercy with no voice to answer them. This is what divine consequence looks like. Not always fire from heaven, not always lightning in the sky, but the slow and crushing collapse of every false thing they built on pride. Beloved, let this stand as a warning for us all. Do not despise what is holy. Do not trample on what God has declared precious. Do not exchange eternal treasure for temporary glitter. The narcissist sits in ashes because they refuse to discern the difference between a jewel and a stone. You must not follow their path. Guard what God has given you. Cherish the relationships, the callings, the moments of grace that He places in your hands, because what is discarded lightly today may become the loss that cannot be undone tomorrow. And to you, the one who was treated as disposable, stand tall. Heaven has seen your worth all along. Do not weep as though you were the loser in this story. You were never the loss they were. You remain the gem, carried in the treasury of God's kingdom, while they are left to choke on the gravel of their own choosing. Their cries are the evidence of justice, not of your failure. You were the blessing, and they were too blind to see it. Will you learn from their downfall? Will you honor the gems God has placed in your life? Will you reject the pebbles that tempt but do not last? Make your declaration today and let heaven hear it. Comment below with the words, God's justice always prevails. Let this be more than a phrase. It is a declaration of faith, a reminder that no matter how dark the season, no matter how loud the arrogance of the wicked, God's justice cannot be silenced. Their downfall is the evidence, your endurance is the testimony, and heaven itself is the witness. By writing these words, you are standing with truth, aligning with the eternal order that pride can never overthrow. The pain of losing what cannot be replaced. There are wounds that sting for a moment, and with time they heal. There are mistakes that can be corrected, apologies that can be made, and broken fences that can be mended. But there is another kind of loss, a loss that carves into the soul with permanent force, a loss that no amount of time, effort, or pleading can undo. That is the grief consuming the narcissist now, the torment of losing what cannot be replaced. When they cast you aside, they believed in their arrogance that someone else could fill your place. To them, you were one among many, a chapter they could close and reopen at will. But the truth they face today is cruel and undeniable. You were not one among many. You were the only one. What you carried was not ordinary. It was rare, it was holy, it was heaven's own imprint upon your life. Your presence had a fragrance that cannot be duplicated. Your voice carried a weight that cannot be mimicked. Your prayers created a covering they did not understand until it was gone. In trading you for shallow substitutes, they did not simply let go of a relationship, they forfeited an atmosphere, a shield, a divine alignment that will not come again. The realization of this absence torments them like a shadow that never leaves. They sit among people, yet none of those faces can mirror the light that once shone through yours. They hear many voices, yet none carry the calm that steadied their soul when you spoke. They reach for comfort in other hands, yet feel nothing but emptiness, for no touch can match the safety that once came from yours. They thought gems could be replaced by pebbles, but now the contrast screams at them daily. Where once there was radiance, now there is dullness. Where once there was peace, now there is turmoil. Where once there was treasure, now there is rubble. This pain is not like the sting of losing money, friends, or fleeting pleasures. Those things can be regained. Money comes and goes, friends come and go. Status rises and falls. But you were not a possession that could be recovered at will. You were a one-time gift, entrusted to them by God, and when they despised it, they sealed their own famine. What they long for now is not simply reconciliation with a person, but restoration of a moment in history, and that is the one thing God never allows. Time moves forward, not backward. Doors that are closed in divine judgment do not reopen. The agony of knowing they cannot return is what eats at their spirit like fire in dry wood. And the cruel irony is that their eyes are now open. At first, pride blinded them to your worth. They dismissed your patience as weakness, your faithfulness as ordinary, your prayers as unnecessary. They thought they were wise to mock, clever to walk away, powerful to discard. But now, in the echo of emptiness, they see with perfect clarity. They see the truth of who you were, and that clarity is a blade sharper than any sword. For what good is sight if all it shows you is the treasure you can never hold again? Their regret is not vague, it is specific, it is piercing, it is replayed in memory after memory, every scene reminding them of the gem they chose to throw away. This is why their loss is more than sadness. It is torment. It is not only the loneliness of an empty house or the silence of a phone that does not ring. It is the haunting knowledge that they had something unrepeatable, irreplaceable, divine, and they wasted it. And now, every attempt to fill that void only magnifies it. Every new face feels counterfeit. Every new comfort feels shallow. Every new pursuit feels cursed. They do not merely miss you. They are tormented by the certainty that nothing they do will ever bring back what was lost. That is the pain of losing what cannot be replaced. It is not pain that fades, it is pain that transforms into a lifelong shadow. It is the quiet judgment of heaven, allowing them to sit in the echo of their own choice, a choice that cannot be undone, a choice that stripped their soul of its greatest treasure. And while they may still try to pretend to the world that they are strong, their nights betray them, their silence betrays them, their tears betray them, because deep down they know they once held a gem, and now they hold nothing but stones. The divine lesson behind their pain. Pain is never wasted in the economy of God. What seems like random collapse to the narcissist is in truth the handwriting of heaven across the walls of their life, spelling out a lesson they refused to learn in gentler ways. They thought their brilliance could outsmart truth. They thought their pride could silence conviction. They thought their charm could cover wickedness. But God, who sees the heart, will never allow arrogance to stand forever. He lets a man climb the ladder of his own making, only to watch that ladder topple under its own weight. And when it falls, the sound is not just ruin, it is revelation. The divine lesson begins with exposure. The narcissist believed they could juggle illusions forever. They thought they could mask cruelty with smiles, replace loyalty with counterfeit affection, and trade treasures for trinkets without consequence. But the collapse of their illusions is God's way of tearing the veil. He has stripped away the shadows so that their own eyes must face what they refused to admit, that they traded glory for dust, and now they sit in the dust they exalted. This is the lesson that pride always blinds before pain opens. Until it hurts enough, the truth will not penetrate. Now, in their silence, they hear it loud. Their pain also teaches the nature of true worth. They spent years confusing attention with affection, applause with love, material glitter with divine favor. But when the crowd disperses, when the money runs out, when the admirers vanish, what remains is nothing. That is when they remember the atmosphere you carried, the peace that followed your prayers, the stability that came with your presence, the favor that surrounded their life only because God sent you as a covering. The emptiness they feel now is God's highlighter, pointing to the reality they overlooked. For nothing they chase will ever replace the blessing of what they once had and lost. There is also in their pain a lesson about stewardship. Scripture makes clear that every gift entrusted by God demands care. Whether it is a talent, a calling, or a person, to despise what heaven gives is to invite judgment. The narcissist treated you like a common stone, when in truth you were a gem cut by the hand of the Creator. And now the judgment upon their life is not arbitrary, it is proportionate. They despised treasure, so they inherit emptiness. They mocked light, so they sit in darkness. They mishandled favor, so favor has been lifted. Their tears are the wages of their neglect. And yet, this lesson is not written only for them. It is written for you, beloved, and for all who will listen, because while they sit in their ruin, you must see the vindication of heaven. Their pain is God's way of declaring your value before the universe. It is proof that you were never small, never replaceable, never ordinary. The collapse of their pride becomes the canvas on which God paints your dignity. Their fall is the backdrop against which your worth shines brighter. In their cries you hear not only their regret, but heaven's affirmation. You were the blessing, you were the test, you were the sacred gift they mishandled. Do you see how divine justice weaves lessons for both sides? For them, it is the crushing recognition of what pride costs. For you, it is the lifting assurance of what grace preserves. Their agony reminds you that your pain was not unnoticed, your tears were not wasted, your prayers were not forgotten. God allowed you to be rejected so that He could exalt you, apart from their arrogance. And in their emptiness, you find confirmation that your worth was always real. The divine lesson behind their pain is severe but necessary. Pride cannot be cured with comfort. It must be crushed by consequence. Blindness cannot be healed with whispers. It must be seared by the light of loss. And arrogance cannot be broken by logic. It must be shattered by regret. That is why God has permitted this season. Not because He delights in suffering, but because He delights in truth. And truth, when despised, always returns as judgment. So they sit in their silence, learning what they once refused, and you, as you watch from a distance, learn too. You learn that God vindicates His own. You learn that you are precious in His sight. And you learn that no matter how loudly the narcissist boasted in their season of pride, the final word always belongs to heaven. The contrast between you and them. One of the most striking aspects of divine justice is the way God draws a line of contrast so sharp, so undeniable, that no one can miss it. He sets the righteous and the unrighteous side by side so the difference cannot be blurred. And now the narcissist finds themselves standing in that contrast, exposed by the brilliance of your endurance. While they sit in loss, you walk in dignity. While they cry over emptiness, you stand with a fullness that no man can take. This contrast is not accidental. It is orchestrated by heaven to display the difference between pride and humility, between arrogance and faithfulness, between what collapses and what endures. Look at the two pictures. On one side there is the narcissist, restless, hollow, surrounded by the ruins of their own choices. Their laughter has turned into silence. Their companions have become accusers. Their pursuit of shallow pleasures has turned into a famine of the soul. They once boasted that they could not be touched, that they were the master of their own story, yet now every corner of their life testifies to the fact that God cannot be mocked. They reap what they sowed, and the harvest is bitter. On the other side stands you, the one they mocked, the one they underestimated, the one they believed would crumble without them. Yet here you are still standing, still moving, still glowing with the quiet radiance of someone held by God's hand. You did not escape pain, but your pain became the soil in which wisdom grew. You did not avoid tears, but your tears watered the seeds of your growth. And while they are surrounded by noise yet suffocated by emptiness, you walk with fewer voices around you, but with deeper peace within you. They thought discarding you would break you, but it has only revealed your strength. This is the irony of heaven's design. What looks like defeat in the moment becomes the seed of triumph in time. The narcissists thought they had the upper hand, but God has turned the tables. Their hands are now empty, while yours are lifted in praise. Their path grows darker, while yours grows brighter. They cling to pebbles that cut into their palms, while you are being refined as a jewel that shines even more. Their story is one of descent, yours is one of ascent. And this contrast is God's exclamation point, a living sermon that says to all who watch, this is what happens when you despise what is holy, and this is what happens when you endure with faith. The contrast runs deeper than circumstances. It reaches into identity. They have built their life on pretense, masks, manipulation, and lies, and now those masks are crumbling. You, however, have built your life on truth, and truth does not need disguises. Their identity is being stripped, while yours is being affirmed. Their reputation collapses under whispers of betrayal, while yours is quietly honored by heaven's applause. This is not coincidence. It is the eternal principle that light and darkness can never share the same space. When light shines, it exposes what darkness tried to conceal. And so the narcissist cries in loss, not only because they miss you, but because your existence itself now becomes their judgment. Every step you take forward without them proves they were never your source. Every blessing that finds you in their absence declares that their presence was never the key to your destiny. Every moment of peace you live in magnifies the chaos they chose for themselves. The contrast is a mirror they cannot avoid, and it burns more than words ever could. Understand this, beloved. God has lifted you as a standard, not merely for your vindication, but for His glory. Your survival is not only your story, it is His testimony. By setting you and the narcissist side by side, He shows the world the fruit of arrogance and the fruit of faithfulness. He displays in living color the destiny of those who despise His gifts and the destiny of those who cling to His hand. And while they sink in regret, you rise in grace. The final truth that cannot be denied.